We will begin by calling the meeting to order, and we will have the roll call, please.
Karen Kahn.
Present.
Kirk Martin.
Yep.
Craig R. Curry. Carl Hopkins.
Here.
Dolores Johnson. Bruce Miller.
Here.
Jim Wilson.
Here.
Thank you.
First item is changes to the agenda. Do we have any changes, Madam Director?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have one change tonight. The lease agreement with Patricia Costello. We're going to pull that document. She's had some changes in her business arrangement, and we just need to pull that one for tonight.
Okay, we will remove that item 3, lease agreement with Patricia Costello, for a later time. Before we proceed further, we would like to have a special presentation this evening, and we would like to ask Rebecca Fribley if she would come up to the front, please. We would like to recognize Rebecca this evening.
Good evening.
We are very glad to have you, Rebecca. We would like to recognize you, the Senior Property Management Specialist, Rebecca Fribley, who was with us for her last Airport Commission meeting tonight. Rebecca will be retiring on April 13th after exactly 20 years of service to the City of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara Airport. With a background in education, Rebecca became a transplant from the Midwest in the mid-1980s. As her 3 children were becoming young adults, she embarked on a new vocation at the airport in 1997. She started out in the administrative roles and over time proved herself to be a dedicated and valued colleague. She advanced to take the role of lead property specialist at the airport. For the last many years, she has been the person that the airport's tenants, from yard tenants to terminal concessionaires and hangar lessees, could count on to support them and help solve the constant stream of challenges of being at an airport. Rebecca's calm in the storm personality and incredible institutional knowledge will be missed very much at the airport. She's embarking on the next chapter of her life, relocating back to her Midwest to be closer to her grandchildren. We thank her so much for her service and wish you the very best of luck in your retirement.
Thank you, Commissioners. It's been a pleasure and an honor working with you and working for the City of Santa Barbara here at the airport. I will miss the staff, the Commission, believe it or not, even, and I appreciate your kind words very much. Thank you.
We have one more set of kind words from Dolores Johnson. Dolores was not able to be with us, but Commissioner Johnson writes, "I'm sorry to see you leave us, and I hope you're going to enjoy your retirement. Your professionalism and always being there to help us will be sorely missed."
Thank you very much.
We have a little presentation. So to say thank you, we have here. Okay for you. Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Commission Khan, just as a side announcement with Rebecca's retirement, we will be hosting a retirement gathering for Rebecca on her last day of work, April 13th. So we'll be sending out a flyer or invitation so you can join us for that as well.
Great. Thank you. All right, moving on, we now come to the section of public comment where any member of the public may address the Airport Commission on any subject that is within the jurisdiction of the Commission and is not scheduled before them that same day. Total amount of time for public comment is 15 minutes, and no individual speaker may speak for more than 2 minutes. And I have 3 speaker slips. Was there any others? Okay, the first one is from Ed Foster.
Commissioner Khan, Commissioners, Ed Foster. I am a Vietnam veteran serving in the U.S. Army from 1968 to 1973, and then subsequently for several years with the Army National Guard here out of the Santa Barbara Armory, retired in 1998. I'm here tonight to introduce a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I did fly a helicopter in Vietnam, and we do have, as a member of the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 218, a helicopter that we use for display and memorabilia, if you will, or history, owned by the chapter. And the chapter is now looking for a place to store that helicopter or keep it, since the Armory is being sold to the school district. I would like to give the rest of my time to my associate, who would talk to you more about those details. Thank you.
Thank you. And that would be Mr. Robertson or Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I'm Greg Brown.
Okay, Mr. Brown.
What I've handed out is are pictures of the helicopter that we're talking about, putting on display. Basically, we want to start a Vietnam memorial using that helicopter, and Jerry will explain the history of the helicopter. Right now, on the plans is a memorial to the Marines that started the base out here. Maybe you're all aware of it. That's been approved to go in front of the terminal. No, you don't know about that. Yeah, the wings of
Yes.
honor. That's the name of it. So just for is it for the Marines or just the? I think it's just the military in general. And for us, just Vietnam vets is what the helicopter is all about. So those are he got the helicopter, and that's where we want to display it, is in front of the High Sierra. And anyway, you can get an idea of what the grounds look like.
Thank you very much. And that's Jerry Robertson.
Commissioners and staff. Our chapter, this particular helicopter is a veteran of Vietnam. It was flown in Vietnam, has the bullet holes in it to prove it. It's been patched. We've tracked the history of the aircraft. What we're looking for now is a place to park the helicopter. This particular time it's been at the National Guard, but as was stated, the city is taking over that property, and we don't know when they're taking it over, but you can't wait until the last minute. We've been approached by the restaurant next door with the concept, and this is just a feasibility study to see whether or not we should go forward. This helicopter is on a trailer. We take it to schools. We're in parades. We take it just about anywhere that we've been, as far north as Buellton and down to Carpinteria for different explorations. It's mounted permanently on the trailer. It has no engine. There's no fuel in it. And the idea would be to level off a little bit of the hillock, which is to the right of the entrance of the restaurant.
Yeah, you got a picture of that.
And I guess he passed you a picture of that hillock, with the concept of purchasing what the chapter finally, after being involved with the chapter almost 25 years, finally has in a financial position to complete this project. And the concept would be to put 2 RV covers end to end, with one side, the street side, exposed, not exposed, but available for viewing, with fiberglass fronts, so that it would be used for the restaurant, as a point of attraction to get people to come in, and for us that we could on notice move a couple of the parking blocks and have Thomas Towing tow it out and into whatever exposition we have. This is a feasibility study. It takes a lot of time, I recognize it, but we really don't want to throw a lot of energy into it if we're just going to get a flat out no at the end. And that's essentially what I'm here for, and I'm more than welcome to any questions.
Any questions at this point? I'm sure there will be some later once the proposal is made.
It's our intention to use a professional landscape architect to come up with a concept of what it looks like. But the owners of Sierra are very interested. We were rather surprised, but you got to take an opportunity when you see it.
Great. Well, thank you. We appreciate your letting us know.
Okay.
My only question was, have there been discussions with airport staff?
No.
on this?
Not that I know of. This is very recent. I mean, we're starting to look now, and the point was that we were going to get further into the feasibility before we worked with the staff. But we will. Oh, definitely.
I understand before you can do anything, you have to be approved by the Arts Council. Is that true?
I'm not
On
sure.
display.
Did you hear what
Hazel?
he said? Something like that would have to be approved by the Arts Council?
I'm going to.
We will look at the proposal once it's presented to or to the city airport department, and provide full details of what would be required at that time. But I'm not at liberty to discuss any specific details at this point.
Great. No, we appreciate you bringing us the concept, and it's, I'm sure, very much a chicken and the egg process. Do we bring it to them first, or do we ask you folks? And so now that we know about it, it will be something that can move through channels.
Having experience, I dealt with the commission 30 or 35 years ago, and this is when I tried to put together a museum dedicated to Vietnam veterans and located out here at the airport. I didn't have 2 nickels to put together. That was a learning curve. And when we brought the helicopter in on a C-130, it was parked over by where PHI used to be. And we had to come up with insurance, which there's my learning curve. This aircraft would be covered by 2 insurances, one by the restaurant because they lease the property and that's their property to use. The other is that the chapter has a blanket policy that covers anything that we do with any equipment that we have from the Vietnam veterans, and I will be happy to provide that copy
Sure.
of that.
And at this stage, we are just hearing about the concept, so we'll be
Understand.
interested to see the submission that goes forward, and hopefully it'll be back to us as a proposal with all the details. Thank
Great.
you so much.
Okay, thank
Should
you.
we go through the Arts Commission first?
That's an interesting question. I'm not aware of the actual proper procedure. I think Hazel would probably.
Yes, Commissioner Khan, the first opportunity to submit a complete proposal to the airport and sit down and visit with staff and allow us to review it along with the lease agreement with iSierra. I mean, there's lots of details here. So we're totally unprepared to discuss it tonight.
Journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first application.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on now to the consent calendar with the changes of no item 3, no lease agreement with Patricia Costello. Do I hear a motion regarding the consent calendar?
Move approval?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's been passed. The consent calendar is considered and passed. Moving on now to the notices that on Thursday, March 9th, 2017 at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at Airport Administration. Next item are liaison reports, and we come to City of Santa Barbara Liaison Council Member Frank Hotchkiss.
Good evening. Nothing as interesting as the last thing you just had. A week from today is the State of the City address by the mayor at the Libero Theater at 8 in the morning. Second thing I should tell you is that we're proceeding with our oversized vehicle parking prohibition. That's parking on streets. It's been misunderstood that meant you couldn't drive an oversized vehicle like what do they call them, Sprinter. You can drive them anywhere in town, that's fine, and park, but so long as it's off street. But that's still being refined. And that's all I've got for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is our City of Goleta liaison, Councilmember Michael T. Bennett.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'd just like to let you know that in the next 6 weeks or so, maybe 2 months, there's going to be a tremendous amount of activity on repaving our roads, which are in terrible condition. Not an unusual occurrence throughout the state of California, of course, but I just mentioned that to you because it's going to affect the entire city. So all the way from the east end at Patterson Avenue all the way out to the west end at Cathedral Oaks. So I'm sure there'll be some temporary delays in regards to getting to the airport or getting off the airport. So we'll do our best to manage that traffic detours as necessary. But I just thought I'd pass on to you folks to be aware of this is going to be occurring very, very shortly. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And that brings us to item 8, administrative reports, subject being the airline rates and charges for fiscal year 2018.
Yes, Commissioner Khan. Tom Bullers, our admin analyst, will do the presentation tonight on our negotiated rates with the airlines.
Good evening, Commissioners. We make this presentation once a year. We negotiate annually with our airlines. They operate under an annual permit. That annual operating permit dictates the rental rates they pay, landing fees, remain overnight fees, and also imposes some security and operational requirements on the airlines. Some security-related items, they have to obey all the requirements imposed by the TSA. We do background checks on employees for their badges. We audit their access media, and we also maintain security for people who are in the secure sterile area at the airline's invitation, so if they're delivering freight or other supplies. Air service changes are an important component of this. They kind of drive a lot of our budget. For FY 2018, that begins on July 1st, we're projecting about a 13.5% increase in passengers versus the current fiscal year 2017. A lot of that is driven by some really significant upgauging by American and United. Dallas-Fort Worth in April will be switching to a mainline A319 aircraft. That's roughly a 70-seat aircraft to a 128-seat aircraft. And then United, on one of their San Francisco flights and one of their Denver flights, will be switching to an A320 and an A319 aircraft. And those are 50-seat aircraft going to 150 and 128 seats. So very significant changes in size and no reduction in frequency. On the downside, Alaska has informed us that they will not be doing their Seattle summer seasonal service this year. So last year they provided that service from June to November, but they will not be doing that this year.
Was that an additional flight for the summer, in addition to their normal Seattle service?
Yes,
which will not now occur.
They used to provide, last summer they provided 2 daily flights to Seattle. No, this summer they'll only do 1 flight.
Thank you.
As part of the recoverable costs that we recover from the airlines, we include operating expenses for the operations and maintenance of the airport, capital improvements, debt service, less any passenger facility charges. The debt service relates to the airline terminal, and annual deposits to mandatory reserve funds, and those are council mandated reserves for disasters and other contingencies. The methodology we've used since the opening of the terminal, we have a number of cost centers. The airfield, about 30% of our operational costs. The terminal building, 50%. Boarding bridges are based on actual costs. Commercial, industrial, 10%, and other, another 10%. This has shifted a little bit for FY18. We've actually reduced the terminal buildings allocation from 55% and increased the other allocation from 5% to 10%. And a big part of that is during FY18, the Ampersand building will return to the airport. So we're anticipating some significant O&M increases in the other category. For the terminal building rents, we take the terminal building costs using that 50% cost center, and then that's about $10.1 million, and we credit the airlines rental car revenue and concessions revenue, and gets us a total terminal building requirement of about $7.6 million. We divide that by the total terminal size, 67,000 plus square feet, and that gives us a calculated rate of $113. We then charge the airlines for the actual space that they rent at the terminal. That's 24,550 feet. And we negotiate a rate with the airlines, and we come up with $104 at that negotiated rate, which gives us a total revenue for the terminal building of $2.5 million. For the boarding bridge, we take the O&M costs for the boarding bridge, $38,500, and add it to the debt service requirement for the boarding bridges for a total boarding bridge rate or cost of $247,000. When we divide that by our projected airline turns, that gives us a boarding bridge rate of about $46 per turn, and boarding bridge revenues of $247,500. Remain overnight fees. This is a new fee that we implemented in FY 2017. We've tied the rate to the boarding bridge rate, so we're going to be proposing for FY 18 that it's $46. The fee is assessed on aircraft parked on the ramp overnight, but we exempt aircraft that are parked at a boarding bridge since they pay a boarding bridge fee. We then look at airline landing fee rates, and this is a residual cost center, so we look at all of the O&M costs for the airport, about $19.4 million, and then we credit the airlines for all of the other revenue at the airport. It gives us a total landing fee requirement of $3.7 million. Our projected landing weight is 532,000 pounds. Which gives a calculated rate of almost $7. We negotiated a rate of $3.99, and that would give us an airline revenue of about $2.1 million. So we met with the airlines in February. We gave them a detailed cost analysis that was based on our FY18 operating budget. And they were okay with these cost increases. This is what we negotiated. It's about a little less than 3% for most of those items. And this is the summary to show that. So in FY17, the terminal building rent was $101 and goes to $104. So a little less than 3%. Landing fees are up a little less than 3%. The boarding bridge, because it is that fixed cost center, is really dependent on the number of turns that are used. So it makes a little bigger jump to $46. And then we haven't proposed any changes to the fuel flowage rates. So just to place the rates and charges into a little context, these are all of the airports in California with commercial air service. Cost per enplanement is the CPE metric that kind of lets us compare roughly apples to apples. You can see that Santa Barbara is about fourth highest in the state at the end of FY16. Based on our projections for FY17 and our proposed rates for FY18, we actually come down a little bit. Our rates, our cost per enplane passenger. The airlines, this is important for them when they're negotiating with us, but it is I'll note a small percentage of their overall operating costs, typically 5% or less. But we do try to keep that low.
What is that huge spike there in the middle? I can't quite.
It's for Carlsbad, and I believe this is when they lost their commercial air service.
Okay.
So their emplanements
Went to
took a
zero?
nosedive and their costs
Okay.
stayed the same.
Thank you.
So our recommendation for tonight is that Commission approve the airline rates and charges for fiscal year 2018. Terminal building, an annual rate of $104 a square foot. Landing fees of $3.99 per 1,000 pounds of gross landed weight. Boarding bridge fees of $46 per turn. Remain overnight fees of $46. And maintain the fuel flowage rate of 5 cents per gallon of fuel sold. Any questions?
Questions?
Yes. Just a curiosity, the gross landed weight, is that the maximum gross landed weight, the actual calculated for each flight? How is that figured?
It's the max gross
Max.
landed weight.
Okay.
Based on the
There's-
published
There's
FAA
a tape, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
regulations.
Any other questions?
No, I will add that the budget subcommittee, as noticed, met before this meeting, and that was attended by myself, Commissioner Wilson, Commissioner Hopkins, and we did unanimously recommend that the package be forwarded to the commission. We also reviewed the budget modeling that went into this and the composition of that.
Any other questions or comments? Do I?
I move to approve the airline rates and charges for next fiscal year.
Do I hear a second?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of the commission approving the airline rates and charges for fiscal 2018?
Aye.
And opposed? The motion is carried. Unanimous. And the next item on the agenda, item 9, is the new Santa Barbara Airport Marketing Plan.
Yes, indeed. And Deanna Zackerson will make the presentation since she prepared the plan. So take it away.
Alrighty, well, make sure I'm turned on. Good evening, Commissioners. It's a little uncustomary for me to be arraigned sitting down, but it might take me several minutes to get to the podium otherwise with my broken ankle. So I'm going to speak to you from this spot here and talk to you a little bit about our new airport marketing plan and look forward to any questions you might have as we move along. So we have a new marketing plan for the airport. It will span the next fiscal period, the next 2 years of the fiscal budget with the city. It's a marketing plan that's focused on commercial air service. Now, of course, there are other things that we market as well, commercial properties and that kind of thing, which we will have a separate marketing plan focused for them. This is specifically focused on commercial air service as our really key and critical activity here. Part of the point of having a marketing plan is that we do a lot of different things, and it's oftentimes good to sort of harness all those things in one place and recognize all the things that you're doing in one plan. And part of that, too, is that it's been a while since we have gone out to the talent pool for marketing services. So we plan to issue a request for qualifications for potentially a new marketing firm to assist us with marketing. And as we do that, we will actually post the marketing plan on the airport's website so that folks can see that. Why do we do a marketing plan? Well, of course, a comprehensive review of your marketing activities is really important to make sure you're just not doing things for the sake of doing the same things over and over again, but really just reviewing that the things you're doing make sense. We are seeing and hearing that marketing from the perspective of the air carriers is becoming more important. Hazel's been attending a number of meetings late last year, early this year, with air carriers, and they speak repeatedly of that they would like to see more marketing coming from the airport to promote service. So that's very, very important. Another thing is that, as I think we all know, the diversification of the various media that are out in the marketplace is sort of it's blossoming. And so just to make sure that you are placing your marketing in the right places, and also making sure that our outcomes are measurable and making a difference, because we have quite the limited budget. So you want to make sure that you're putting your money where it's creating the most value. So I'm going to get hopefully not too academic on you, but just talk to you for a second about the components that we have in the marketing plan. First of all, it's just a situational analysis where we think we are today with behaviors of passengers, perceptions of the airport and its service. Then we conduct various kinds of research to really try to determine if those assumptions of our situation are correct or not. We can learn a lot from it, and of course, research helps inform our goals and our strategies as we move forward with marketing. We have a set of overarching goals, which really are airport goals. They're air service goals that we intend for our marketing to help us achieve. So really there's sort of a sequential step here where our marketing goals should help us achieve our overarching goals. And our marketing goals, of course, are very specific to our actual marketing efforts. Strategies, that's sort of how we do it, which is different than tactics, and you'll see that quite clearly. Tactics are actually what you do, sort of the boots on the ground, whether it's media relations, advertising, that kind of thing. So I think this will be a little bit more clear as I go through these steps here. So situational analysis on a high level. In 2005, which was the top year, over 800,000 passengers. Make note of that. At this point, last year, we had about 660,000 passengers. We've had obviously some challenges in providing enough flight options for passengers heading out of Santa Barbara, yet the airport has a number of fabulous advantages over other airports, but sometimes we have the sense that they're underappreciated. And so that is obviously some work for us to do. There are a number of misperceptions we feel out in the marketplace, some of them fueled by real issues, and by that I mean someone might, for example, be interested in flying out of Santa Barbara one time and look up a flight, see that it's an expensive flight, and then from that point build a perception that it's expensive to fly out of Santa Barbara, when that's not universally true, as we all know. So dealing with some of those misperceptions is pretty important to changing any behaviors and getting more people to fly. So the research that we have done, some of it you have seen. We completed the leakage study, which of course leakage is a fine word for determining where people are flying, which airports people are flying out of when they should be flying out of Santa Barbara. We completed a terminal passenger survey, which we actually just got the results from today from the University of Santa Barbara, so we'll be sharing that with you. We're also doing an online survey of the business community to gather more data about the needs and travel patterns and expenditures of the business community flying out of Santa Barbara. And in the future, we would like to do some survey work in the community to really get a finer sense of public perceptions of Santa Barbara Airport and how people are, their behaviors related to flying out of Santa Barbara, the choices that they make. So as far as our marketing goals go, we obviously aim to establish Santa Barbara as a unique community asset. It's really a one and only asset for this community. It's an economic driver. We'll be talking more about that in the coming weeks as we talk about an economic impact study that we've also done. We're interested in finding champions in the community, whether they be in the business community or other notable individuals in the community that can carry the message, perhaps in a more effective way than we can, of the value of Santa Barbara. And we'll illustrate that for you just a little bit. We want to make sure that our marketing investments result in conversions, which is a fancy way of saying we want to be putting people in seats. And we measure that by high load factors, high departure factors. We have pretty high load factors out of Santa Barbara today, but we'd like to see those just as high as possible, of course. We can't do everything with paid advertising, so we'd like to be doing work to make sure that we are getting the word out there in other forms of media publicity, through the news media, social media, that kind of thing. And then with social media, we would like to, and we have done a fairly good job of already, building a community of local residents that engage with us in social media and follow what's going on with the airport. So our strategies and how we accomplish this, obviously a research-based approach to make sure that the brand identity, how people perceive Santa Barbara Airport, that make sure that that's resonating with the community. We want to make sure that Santa Barbara Airport has a credible human face and human voice. We don't want it to just be a building. As beautiful as the building is, it's not just a place. We want it to be ubiquitous with Santa Barbara. It's part of our community. We want to obviously reinvent Santa Barbara to become the given airport choice and more effectively address some of these misperceptions that we think may be out there. When it comes to advertising, Santa Barbara Airport is not, we're not selling widgets. We're selling, if anything, experiences. We're selling community value. We're generating economic value in the community. And so we don't see ourselves as a typical advertiser. And sometimes that's the kind of advertising that we find ourselves doing, but we would also like to find a way to elevate ourselves above sort of the typical type of advertising for just selling something commercially on the market, because we are different. And media, working with the media, being consistent about how we work with media, an open relationship, a consistent relationship with the media, and making sure that we're out educating people about aviation and the airport on a continual basis. Very important to us. We target our marketing resources and leverage relationships. That can be, for example, our chambers. It's a very obvious relationship, but even schools. But relationships within the community that can help us leverage demand for commercial air service. Our carriers, as I just mentioned, are very keen on marketing, and we are keen on partnering with them to a greater extent. We do so already in some of our advertising, where we feature our air carriers, of course. But even in some of our community events, we would like to have our air carriers have a more prominent place with us. We want to work to make sure that we're more visible in the community. We do a fair amount of that already, but that is something that brings a lot of value to the airport. And in community events, that's one way that we increase our visibility. The last bullet is one that I think is interesting to a lot of us, because we know that in terms of competitors, that our neighbor to the south, LAX, is our big competitor. But we need to find the right approach to sort of strategically contrasting our offer with LAX so that it resonates with people. Okay. So tactics. This is just sort of the nuts and bolts things that help us do all of those things. Doing regular research to make sure that we are constantly keeping a pulse on how the community views Santa Barbara Airport and what we have to offer. Multimedia advertising. In our case with advertising, we do invest in advertising. We want to look at making perhaps a more focused emphasis on social media and television, as opposed to perhaps print media. Not that we won't advertise in print media, but we need to be a bit strategic about where we do it, just because the landscape is so large. FlySBA.com. We're actually already, Lynn Houston on our staff is already working on developing some new features for the website, make it more user-friendly. Again, we've used some research there to determine that about 60% of the folks that are going to the FlySBA.com website are doing it on a mobile device. So that tells us that we need to be accommodating that. And they're most often going for flight information. So that tells us that, where we need to be putting the emphasis. Of course, expanding the media footprint, social media footprint, which we've done quite a bit of that over the last year, primarily in Facebook, but also Instagram. And the Air Service Alliance that we have talked about a little bit the last while, developing those relationships with the chambers and Visit Santa Barbara and others that can help us support increased air service. One of the things that we haven't done perhaps in a while is making sure that we are communicating openly with the editorial boards of our local media to make sure that we are keeping them up to date on what is going on at the airport. And in the same vein, being consistently reliable and open in our relationships with the news media, because they are an important resource for us. Commit for local champions to be spokespeople for the airport. We have been out meeting with folks that we think would be effective spokespeople in different contexts for the airport. That would be the chamber, and we also have some local community, I guess you would say celebrity type spokespeople for the airport that I'll show you in just a second. We would like to partner with local television, again talking about elevating our profile beyond that of a traditional advertiser. In other words, we may find some ways with local television to partner and share information about the airport that isn't traditional advertising in the sense that we would see it. Maybe something incorporated into the weather report, something of like, and we're currently exploring that at this point. Our sponsorship commitments. This is actually an important one for us because we have sponsored many different types of events and causes in the community for quite some time. And some of those haven't been reevaluated in a while. Great causes, a lot of them. But again, with limited resources, we sort of took a look at it and felt that what we really needed to do was focus on the core connection with aviation. So if it is a cause that is connected to aviation, there's more of a natural connection to the airport. So an example of that actually is our Isla Vista school sponsorship that we have been participating in for a number of years. They are part of the airport community, and we engage with them as part of our education program. So being out in the community and focusing on our identity as an aviation resource is really important. Again, we need to get out in the community with journalists and academia and helping convey the message of where we are and where we're headed, and creating a speakers bureau. If you know what a speakers bureau is, it's essentially different types of community meetings oftentimes need speakers. And we would be able to provide speakers that could speak on any number of topics related to the airport at their beck and call. So once we've done all those things, we had our strategies in place, we've done all these tactics, the meat of the matter really is measuring it against some of our metrics. And I showed you some of the strategies we have up there. Didn't include all of the metrics that we have in there, but we do have metrics for most of those to be able to measure whether we're successful or not. So, and that, of course, helps us to determine whether our underlying assumptions have been correct as we've been moving forward. So this is sort of where, at the end of it, it's kind of a circular type of a activity where we go through the steps of our marketing plan, get to the end and sort of look at it, recalibrate, figure out if we actually made a difference. And of course, we need to be flexible enough to change, because change is the constant. All right, so now this is the fun part. So talking about local champions, Mary Osborne, and maybe you've seen this commercial. It's been going on television since around the Super Bowl. And this is Mary Osborne. She's a champion longboard surfer out of Ventura, and she loves Santa Barbara Airport. So, and here's her little spot, and we're going to really hope that this works. It's going to take us to YouTube. And we really just see this as sort of a kickoff and introduction to a new focus on marketing, and expect to be coming back to you with updates continually, and look forward to your feedback. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, love to hear it.
Thank you so much. Any questions?
Oh, it's a very nice presentation, and it's got a lot of really great concepts in there. I thought the Speakers Bureau idea, that's fascinating. I think right at that table there, you've got a lot of talent. You can talk about wildlife, pest management, rock and roll, marketing, so many things.
And I think you could use the fact that she whistled past the TSA as being, really by comparison, that's what we do. If anybody sat in the lines at LAX, you know how nice it is to come through Santa Barbara with your maybe 7-8 minutes of standing around.
I was going to suggest even to emphasize the line, which is non-existent to get through TSA, although they may not want you to film getting through TSA, who knows, but that would have been ideal to see the 5 seconds that it takes to go through TSA here.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you. Great presentation.
Did Mary curbside check her surfboard?
That's a good question. She probably left it in the van, is my guess. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That brings us to the airline terminal solar voltaic power purchase agreement, item number 10 on the administrative reports.
Yes, indeed. Jeff McKee has been shepherding this project for, I'm going to say, 6 years or longer. But this is a new approach. So Jeff's going to take the lead tonight. Thank you.
It's probably another Speakers Bureau opportunity.
It is, absolutely.
Bringing solar power to your neighborhood.
Well, Airport Commissioners, I'm glad to be bringing you a new power purchase agreement tonight. If you would. So kind of a little bit of background. As you know, as we were constructing the new terminal, staff were directed to explore ways to offset the increased carbon emissions from the new terminal. So we chose solar photovoltaic as probably the best option to do that, and to use a power purchase agreement. So we've been working on that for a long time, as Hazel said. Solar photovoltaic, sunlight's converted directly into DC power, then inverted into AC, and then delivered to the building. So if we need the power in the building, we'll use it in the building. If we are supplying more than we need in the building, it goes on the grid. We get credit for it, and we can use it later. So that's how this basic works. A power purchase agreement, the provider is responsible for design, permitting, financing, construction, operation, and maintenance of the facility throughout the term of the agreement. And the airport purchases all the power that's produced by the system at a predetermined cost per kilowatt hour. At the end of the agreement, the airport will either purchase the system, or the provider removes the system at their cost. So benefits of a power purchase agreement: generates clean, renewable energy, solar power, no upfront capital costs for the airport, and it provides leverage tax benefits and renewable energy incentives for the provider so that they can lower the cost of the system and provide the power to us more cheaply. Past kind of runs at this: March 2011 and February 2014, we did request for proposals, and those asked the same thing. Plan, build, own, and operate the system, sell the power to the airport. We used the agreement from the city's corporate yard. Our agreement is based heavily on that as a boilerplate, and we asked for a system size up to 80% of demand. So the result was March 2011 solicitation. We were able to come to agreement with that vendor. I will say that our RFP at that time didn't have a lot of certainty in it. We didn't have the building built yet, so we weren't certain on what our demand was going to be. So that made the negotiations difficult. In February 2014, we went out for a solicitation. We selected a vendor and terminated agreement with that vendor due to bankruptcy. So we received, as we terminated that agreement, we received 2 unsolicited proposals from 2 different firms. We evaluated the proposals for economic value, same criteria that we evaluated the earlier RFPs: economic value, system, experience, and schedule. So economic value was the heaviest weighted evaluation criteria there. EEI Solar One was selected from those two firms that submitted. EEI One Solar proposal is to install canopies in the long-term parking lot like you've seen before. They're guaranteeing to deliver 1.45 million kilowatts hour per year of the renewable energy to the terminal. That equates to about 27 million kilowatt hours over the term of the agreement, and no reduction in parking spaces. So this is a picture, it's kind of dark, but of our QTA photovoltaic system on the canopies there. So it's a similar design, I think, that EEI Solar One is proposing, a double cantilever, similar design to this in a long-term lot. So they're also proposing to produce about 75% of the terminal's electrical demand in year one. The panels degrade like 0.5% or 1% per year as time goes by. So that's why it goes down over time. Initial cost, 11.19 cents per kilowatt hour. Energy price escalates at 2.37% per year, years 1 through 15, and then it flattens out, no price increase after year 15. Also guarantees at least 85% of that 1.45 million number gets produced, and no more than 110% of that gets produced. We don't want to produce more power than we need. We'd be selling it back to Edison at much reduced price from what we're buying it for. So we want to stay below our demand. So we did an analysis of EEI Solar One versus Edison pricing. We did a present value comparison. Model assumed 3% inflation rate for Edison power, 5% discount rate for the present value calculation, 20-year term of the agreement. EEI One Solar proposal is $280,000 better than what the buying similar energy from SCE would be over the 20-year agreement. So kind of our next steps, we come to you, ask for your recommendation for council. But then we go to council, ask for their recommendation, do an ordinance there, execute the PPA, assuming that we get approval from council, execute the PPA with EEI Solar One, and they begin design and permitting, and then construction would be expected probably next spring. So I'm asking for recommendation that Airport Commission recommend the City Council approve and authorize the airport director to execute a power purchase agreement with EEI Solar One LLC to develop, own, operate, and maintain a solar photovoltaic generating system at the airport and sell all the power generated to the airport. So questions? I also have Randy Arntzen here tonight, who's the president and CEO of EEI Solar One. And he'd like to do a short presentation too, so either we can do questions now or we can wait till after Randy's presentation, so either way.
Well, I'd say why don't we hear the rest of the information, or does anybody have a pressing question? Well, we'll listen to your presentation then.
All right. Commissioner, staff, good evening. Thank you for getting this project on the agenda tonight so I can present Endelos Energy, which is the EEI of Solar One, and also give you an overview of the total project, what we're going to be doing out in the parking lots. So Endelos Energy, we're a clean energy company, okay? We have two divisions. We focus in energy efficiency and renewable energy, which is solar and wind, different things. Our two divisions, we have a product development division where we develop a lot of our own power generation products. And then we also have an engineering construction division, which that EEI Solar One will reside under. So we do complete engineering, procure, and construct of solar projects, solar wind, energy storage, biomass, biogas, anything renewable. We also do some smart grid, AMI, AMR type kind of projects. Energy efficiency, we focus on the LED lighting controls, and power quality, power factor corrections in buildings. And then we have a renewable energy utility company, which is our PPA company, and that's where EEI Solar One will reside. And we build renewable microgrids, and we build, own, and operate them. So next slide, please. Okay, so Endelos Energy, we're essentially an electrical contractor that focuses on energy efficiency and renewable energy.
We can do almost anything here in the energy efficiency space and power generation. We're a zero net energy company where we look at the energy efficiency, the low-hanging fruit that we can go in and do LED lighting, do power factor correction, reduce the consumption of the building, and then build a lower cost power plant around the building to take it off the grid. Next slide, please. So we have all sorts of capability. We can do everything soup to nuts, from audits to designing, building, constructing, and maintaining power plants. We have over 22 megawatts of solar installation experience and 176 kilowatts of wind power. And of course, we have experience with the energy audits. Next slide, please. Okay. So Energy Solar One, this is our PPA company. And essentially, this is the company that will build, own, and operate the solar carports out in your parking lot. We have a strong investment pool. We have some strong local investors, and then we also have the Wall Street investors. This particular project will be an energy-based fund investment, and we will partner with this investment firm, Endelos Energy, and this investment firm in EEI Solar One. Okay, so the great thing about EEI Solar One, it's a renewable energy utility that focuses on energy efficiency and renewable energy, which is good for Earth and mankind, and so that's the whole theme of this. Next slide, please. Okay, some of our projects that we've done. You'll recognize this one. It's local. This is for the County of Santa Barbara. It's for the Cali-Real campus. That's a megawatt of solar. We've essentially, if we add another 440 kilowatts of continuous power out there, we essentially would have taken the whole campus off the grid. So it's a very successful project that we're very proud of. County's very proud of. Next slide, please. So we have other carport experience. This is Los Angeles Community College. These are the carports, 1 megawatt. So Jeff, in particular, the picture down on the left, this is what we're going to be doing in the parking lot with the fencing and building. So I just wanted you to see that there. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we have other projects that we've done over the years. And so this is mostly carports. Next slide. So your project here, I want to give you a quick project overview. This is an all Santa Barbara project team, okay? Every vendor, every contractor, everything is local to within Santa Barbara and Goleta. Okay, so of course the city here, I'd like to give special accolades to Lilia, Jeff, and Tavia for helping put the deal together because it's taken forever. I mean, we were fighting the cost of money going up and prices, trying to keep the price at something that will work for the city and the airport. Okay, so basically, without you letting us use the land there's no way this project would have come together. And then, so your function of the project will be the land and project management. And then Endelos Energy will be the EPC and construction manager. We'll be providing the PV carports, and also will be the PPA provider under EEI Solar One. John Maloney, he'll be doing all the electrical engineering. Sandtech, they'll be doing the civil and structural engineering. The old Dudat company will be doing the environmental if we need to do that. AECOM, FAA compliance, they'll be helping us getting the solar approval and heights of the carports accepted by FAA. Imperial Electric, they're the electrical contractor. Midco out of Buellton will be doing the parking lot repairs wherever we have to cut a hole or whatever in the parking lot to get the conduit to where we're going. And then, of course, all the local suppliers here in the city. So all the tax dollars stay in the city, which is a good thing for the city. It doesn't come from outside. So next slide, please. Your system, it's 913 kilowatts DC, which equates to 809 kilowatts AC. It's a fixed tilt system. We're going to take up about 56,000 square feet of the parking lot. Of course, the modules we're going to be using are Suniva modules, and inverter will be Growatt. That's all made in America, equipment that we'll be using, including the carports. We're going to be using the steel that'll be made here in the U.S. So this is kind of an all made in America project. Next slide, please. So this is our PPA rate we negotiated, and 11.19 cents to start, and then we're going to escalate that 2.39%. See, Jeff's still working the numbers. So anyway, the good thing about this is that when we get to year 16, after all the debt and everything's paid off, is we're going to fix the rate at 15.58 cents per kilowatt, and we're going to let that run through the end of the project. And I couldn't see any reason why, after all the debt is paid off, why we just couldn't fix it and let it run for 5 years. So, okay, next slide, please. Okay, these are the panels we'll be using. They're U.S. made. They're made in Georgia and Michigan, and it's a product that came out of Georgia Tech. So these are very good panels. They're better than Solar World. So I'm really happy with this product here. Next slide, please. These inverters here are currently being built in Northridge, California, which is right down the road. And so we're going to use these, and we're going to have a quantity of 33 of these. And the panels, we're going to have 2,700 approximately panels out of carports. Next slide, please. So getting ready for the Architectural Review Board, there's a lot of rumors about having a smaller carport or a mid-sized carport, or what we're proposing is a long carport. So we've already done the electrical engineering design, and we're ready for our presentation to the Architectural Review Board. Next slide, please. So this is what you're going to see. These are the carports. Now what's different about these is we're going to paint them the same color as the airport terminal, so it kind of blends with the black panels on top. I think that'll be a very nice look out there in the parking lot. I come to the airport all the time. I'm always flying, and I'm always walking through that parking lot, so I'd like to see something that I'd be proud of, and I think you'd be proud of too. Next slide, please. So you can see the white. What we'll do is we'll put LED lighting underneath, so it'll be efficient at nighttime. Plus, it'll brighten up that parking lot where you'll be able to see, pretty well while you're walking through it. So this is kind of the layout. These are the long arrays that we're proposing. We may have to shorten those up, but that's kind of how the layout on the parking lot will look. Next slide, please. So what we're going to be doing is right there on the entrance to the terminal, the cell parking. Is that over there, Jeff, or that avenue? Right? Oh, I got a pointer here, so. Yeah, short-term parking. So right here is where we're going to be putting 4160 step-up transformer. So all the power from each of these arrays will come into the transfer. It'll get stepped up to 4160 and passed over to the switchgear at the airport. What we're going to be doing here, instead of carving trenches across the parking lot and ripping up the parking lot, we're going to bore to each of the arrays from this point, and then so it'll be a cleaner construction for the parking lot and everything. Next slide, please. So then once we get all the power over to that point in the step-up transformer, we're going to transfer the power down here to a vault that's existing, and there's existing conduit there, and then that'll run down to another transformer that'll step it down to 480, and then we'll feed it into an existing circuit breaker at the terminal. And I believe that's it. So I'm excited for this project, and I hope you are too, and we're looking forward to get started.
Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
No, don't go away.
I'm trying to get out of here.
I'm not sure who this is a question for. I know I've asked it in the past. I'm pretty sure of the answer, but one of the concerns with solar around an airport is glare. For pilots approaching, the last thing we want to see is the sun blasting in our eyes. So how is that addressed?
There's a required FAA glare study to be done, and so
AECOM's gonna be
AECOM will be
doing that,
doing
yes.
that work for Indalos. So they have to show that there isn't glare for pilots.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I had several. So this is a 20-year agreement. I'm curious, just in general terms, what's the agreement early termination liability potential?
In what regard? I'm not sure I understand.
Well, if the airport wished to terminate the agreement prior to the 20 years, what sort of
I
liability?
believe that the agreement says after 7 years that we could negotiate sale
Okay. At
at
the-
market rate.
Okay.
Throughout the term of the agreement, it's market rate if you decide to buy it.
To acquire the facility, or to have the facility removed, or say market rate for the energy at that time?
The value of the facility
Okay.
based on what it can produce.
Okay. And so then at the end of the agreement, I saw that the city has the option to purchase the facility or have it removed. Presumably after 20 years, it's mostly depreciated. Is there a expected residual cost?
There's a net present
there?
value at the point in time. I mean, year 7, you want to buy it, it'll be a net present value kind of situation. So
Okay, all the way to the.
all the way to the
end of
20
it.
years.
So do you have an estimate of what that cost at 20 years
We
would
don't.
look like?
No.
Okay. I was curious, the 85% production guarantee, is that for the full 20 years?
Yes, and that's all insured, okay? So if we
Okay.
miss the production rates, we've got an insurance policy that pays for that. So.
Okay, great. And then I thought I recalled that one of the issues in previous attempts was the conduit sizing out to the vaults. Was that, I recall that correctly? Was there some issues there?
Commissioner Miller, yes, and I believe Indelos did look at that.
Yeah, we will be utilizing the existing conduits. That's why we're stepping up the power to send it across.
Oh, okay.
So the wires are a little bit,
And
for
then,
each.
in terms of, were there some soil issues previously that were a surprise to the respondent at that time?
I'm not sure it was a surprise, but they discovered more information, I think. And we did pass that information along
Okay.
to EEI Solar.
Great. Well, I think we all want this to be successful, so.
I do.
Everything to ensure that would be great. And then, as I understand it, so the ABR will be reviewing the structures, and I would imagine the agreement includes just kind of normal upkeep requirements for how often it's painted.
Yeah, it's in our best benefit to keep those pristine operation, okay, including the aesthetics of
The aesthetics,
Yeah, we'll be
right.
painting it and blowing off all the, dirt and dust.
And
so.
that's, like, aesthetic maintenance is included in the agreement.
I
No,
don't
but
think it
it's
does
over.
speak specifically to
It
aesthetic
doesn't? Yeah,
maintenance.
okay, yeah.
So the airport's ability to, for instance, request that they be painted because they look like they need to be painted. This isn't a facility yard or something. This is our front door to the terminal.
That is not addressed in the agreement.
Okay. It would certainly seem it would be worthwhile to have some understanding of what options the airport has to ensure the aesthetics.
But it has maintenance.
It does
does
have
have
maintenance. It also
maintenance,
has
yeah.
specifics about the materials that we want them to use, so durable materials that we expect to last, especially since they're covered
Sure.
and given a marine environment.
Right. Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Carl? What was the issue you mentioned about the long stretches or short stretches?
Well, watching the last ABR meeting, they were really concerned about shorter arrays. You know more about this than I do. And so not knowing what they're going to, I think because of the look of the array, they were concerned about this big, long, massive galvanized steel array. And what we're proposing is an epoxy painted solution. It's white with black.
So I had Indelos go back and look at the comments from ABR from our prior vendor, so to give them some idea of what the comments might be for their proposed project. So ABR suggested that they reduce the size of the runs of the panel, so that was a different vendor. We'll see what they say about this one.
So instead of having 3 long runs, maybe 4 or 5 shorter runs? Okay.
In terms of reducing capacity of the parking lots during the construction, as we've already heard, we're anticipating a growth in passengers, so which would naturally have an impact on parking capacity. So what sort of anticipation is there of any impact during construction?
The agreement does talk about phasing construction so that we can phase to minimize the disruption as much as we can. And hopefully it'll come at a time when we're at lower volumes in the parking lot, a time of year that we're lower volumes in the parking lot.
Okay.
And what's the estimated duration start to finish?
6 months.
Any other questions?
Well, I would make a motion
Well,
that
I have one last question. Is there a monitoring feature? Does someone
Yes,
monitor
you'll be
this?
able
and-
to put a terminal up in the airport or wherever you'd like to do that, and it'll tell you how much energy you're producing, how much carbon you've reduced.
And do you folks have some kind of monitoring station to see that it's producing properly and the panels aren't
Yes.
getting dirty and
It's
starting.
in our best interest to have that thing performing 100%. So we will be monitoring. Actually, Pascal Oakpole, he'll be the operations manager for this power plant. And we're going to make sure the panels are clean and the wires are well grounded, and we're going to try to produce as much power as we can.
And is that an off-site monitoring, or is that something they do remotely, or how does
You
that?
can do it remotely, on-site. I think we've scheduled one maintenance period where we one time go in and measure all the electrical and everything to make sure everything's performing correctly. But the monitoring system will, in each of those combiner boxes will, to let us know, the production of the system. So.
Chairman Khan, could I make just one point? We only pay for energy that's delivered to our meter, so it's in their best interest to generate as many as they can.
Right.
We don't pay for what they don't generate. So,
Well, actually, we guarantee that we're going to. That costs a lot of money to put that in there, so you're going to get it, one way or another. Okay.
From a marketing standpoint, would we be able to have some sort of a public viewable meter showing the benefits?
Yeah, there's a kiosk you can put in the terminal, or or wherever you'd like to. You can put multiple kiosks to it throughout the terminal too. It's IP addressable kind of system.
Are there other airports in California that have your systems?
No, but
Any-
not my system. Okay, but I mean San Diego Airport. I'm Sacramento. I mean, what are
Fresno has
Fresno?
a pretty big
yeah,
system.
so.
Did I remember correctly that there's the rates from Southern Cal Edison will be demand-based? That is, if we produce a great deal of power during the day, more than we're using, we get to sell it back to them at the high rate. If we then use electricity at night, we're buying it from them at a lower rate?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, any other questions? Do I hear a motion to recommend that the City Council approve and authorize the airport director to execute a power purchase agreement with EEI Solar One, et cetera?
Second?
Any, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries to recommend the approval of the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 11, the subject, the flooding of the Santa Barbara Airport, February 17 to 18, 2017.
Last month, Commissioner Khan, you'll recall we had just met shortly after the flooding that took place at the airport, and there were interest expressed to see how we did and what took place. So our operations staff and planning staff put together this PowerPoint for you tonight, and Kelly Reed, our operations supervisor, will give the presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. This will just be a quick pictorial presentation for you to give you an overview of mostly the airside impacts that we experienced from the flooding. So if you're not familiar with our watershed, here's a picture describing the area that comes to the airport, to our slough mouth, or to our slough in the event of a rainstorm. So there's 7 different creek beds. They're all different colors there that the water flows down those creeks and then into the slough adjacent to the airport property or on airport property. Some of these are highlighted here. We'll have some pictures of Tecolotido Creek, the San Pedro Creek, and we'll also have a picture of the slough mouth in here for you as well, that what you can see at full capacity. Oh, you know what? I'll go back. I do want to point out the flooding. I'm going to show you pictures, but I don't have a group of it overall, but we were flooded from basically the CDT hangars or the above all maintenance ramp here, the Stratman ramp, all the way down through the north side of the parallels in front of Hangar 2 and Hangar 1 ramp, and then all the way down to the end of runway 7. So we had a significant area of the airfield flooded continuously. So our total rainfalls on February 17th for the storm here in Goleta, we had 4.22 inches. San Marcos Pass had significantly more. They had almost 9 inches. So between the two, that meant we got a total of almost 13 inches of rain in the slough here, which is largely what caused most of this flooding. So some of these pictures will be harder to see, but this is the Hangar 1 ramp. The area of ramp you're looking at is water. there's a little bit of pavement right there on the service road that we took pictures from, but that's just all water. In the lowest part of the ramp there, it's estimated at over a foot, maybe 15 to 18 inches deep. This is the Hangar 1 ramp a little closer up with some of our maintenance vehicles driving through it. And you can see the water actually came in from the land side. It came in from one of the creeks through the streets and then emerged onto the AOA. This is looking southbound on the Hangar 1 ramp, and that airplane should not be in water, but it is, unfortunately, because of the flooding. And again, this is the far western portion of the Hangar 1 ramp, and that's our self-service fuel farm area. Everything you see there that looks just a solid color is muddy water, about 3 to 5 inches in the shallower areas and over a foot in the deepest areas. And then further to the east, this is where Hangar 2 ramp is, and just in front of our city T-hangar area. And so this is continuous flooding, like I showed you. And by 3 or 4 in the afternoon, this flooding it extended in a solid line all the way down to the far west end of the airport. So a little bit about our taxiway flooding. This is right in front of the Hangar 1 ramp where taxiway Charlie meets runway 25. This was our third taxiway to flood, so we had a lot of taxiway closures that day. This is taxiway Bravo at Charlie, right in front of the historic Stratman ramp or city tie-down area. This taxiway was under 9 inches of water, and this was actually our longest flooding. We weren't able to reopen this area until Saturday night on the 18th. This is taxiway Juliet, adjacent to runway 25. You can see a little bit of the wildlife issue. It's harder to see it. We've got some better pictures. This taxiway intersection was also under 9 inches of water on the center line where aircraft should be taxiing in. So we had many taxiway intersection closures. And then our runway flooding. So earlier in the day, around noon, 1 o'clock, the runway was unaffected. We did have a significant ponding on the northwest corner of runway 725. By 4 o'clock, this is what the runway looked like. So you can see the runway edge lights go along that edge here. And at the deepest, it's about 9 inches of water. So this is a westbound view at the approach into runway 7. And this is turn around the other direction. This is the eastbound view. And you can see that the water came up to within about 30 feet, 40 feet of the center line, which is what prompted closing the runway. We couldn't predict at that point how far across the runway the flooding would extend. The runway and the taxiways are designed so that the high point is in the middle of the pavement, so the water does shed to the sides. But you can see that's a lot of water. And we've got a photo here of Andrew Bourbon standing in the water right at the taxiway edge lines, and he's standing in about 9 inches of water on the runway. So our runway closed at approximately 4:30 that afternoon and didn't reopen until the next morning till the water had receded. So some of the wildlife effects from this, here's a picture of the Goleta Slough. So you can see along the side here the water is at capacity, and all the drainage in the field here that would normally flow through storm drains down into the slough, the water can't go anywhere because the slough's full. So the water just comes up, which is a large reason of these flooding issues. Here's Tecolotido Creek, and again, the water is at capacity and flooding on both sides. And then San Pedro Creek, this is the creek that's located behind what we call the Boneyard hangars, the two oldest hangars on the northeast corner of the airport. And it's hard to tell. We did have about 2 more feet that the creek could have filled. So it wasn't at capacity, but it was very close and rushing at an extremely fast rate. And then the wildlife issues that occur because of this flooding. Standing water brings in birds, and it brings in a lot of birds. This is on taxiway Charlie at the intersection of runway 25, and those ducks are swimming in the water. Not something that we want immediately adjacent to our runway. So we spent many hours that weekend scaring away birds, trying to protect them and protect our aircraft. Here's another area north of runway 725. You can see we've got many egrets right adjacent to the runway in the runway safety area. We don't typically see that many birds of this species in one location. Thankfully, most of the birds were very receptive to being scared away. And then this picture is pretty hard to see, but this is at Taxiway Bravo and Charlie, that area that stayed flooded the longest. This is at the city tie downs, above all maintenance ramp. And there's about 1,000 or more seagulls right here in the sky. They all come and land, they stand in the water. A lot of the birds are attracted to the large variety of worms that come out of the ground and die on the pavement, and they eat them. And then we do our best to mitigate that and scare the birds away. Usually if we have any gulls, it's maybe 25, 30, maybe a big flock is 100, but when we get rainstorms and flooding, we're in the thousands. And we have just a few photos to show you the historic context of past flooding. Thankfully, this magnitude of flooding only seems to happen every 10 to 15 years here. The top picture was in 1941. That's at our oldest hangars there on the northeast corner of the airport. This picture here. And then this is one of my favorites, the historic terminal, an island surrounded by water from 1969. And then this is a pretty good representation of what we looked like in front of Hangar 2. So the parallel runways, 15 right and 15 left, extend there, going to the right of the photo. But this is how the flooding was on the 17th of February, just continuous all the way down the airfield. And in 2008, this is a picture of our some of our airport properties off of Firestone, and we had very similar flooding in this area. We actually evacuated the majority of tenants on that northwest quadrant of the airport landside because of flooding and their inability to get in and out of businesses once it gets this bad. So just a few photos for the remediation. This is what runway 725 looked like in the morning before we reopened. The water had receded, thankfully, overnight. The tide lowered, the water left the slough, emptied out to the ocean the way it should. And the water level went down. We still had ponding in the grass, but it was off the runway. And thankfully, on the runway, the dirt and debris was really minimal. There wasn't a lot, so cleanup was quick and painless. And here's the runway right after opening. Thankfully, all that water's gone. And just some basic numbers for you. Runway 725 was closed for about 15 hours. It closed Friday afternoon at 4:30 and reopened just before 7:30 the next morning. And approximately 15 commercial flights were canceled because of the runway 725 closure. They're only allowed to operate on that runway. And we're estimating at this point that our initial cost estimate of damages from the flooding and the mud and water removal is a little over $50,000. And here's my photo of the calm after the storm. We had a little rainbow during the cleanup, which was a nice surprise. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. We wanted water, but I guess we didn't quite want that much all at once.
Two questions. First question, the lighting that was enveloped by water, was there any checking done on that? Everything's...
For the most part, we didn't have any lighting issues. The one area we did was runway 15 right, one of our general aviation runways. It's not clear if that was related to the flooding or not, but we did have to keep that runway closed for a few days because the lighting, we weren't able to get the lighting to come back up at night. Okay. But that was the only impact.
And the follow-up to that then, as you were driving around in trucks, were wake rules enforced?
Thankfully, there weren't aircraft operating on those taxiways or ramps that we had to worry about.
Commissioner Martin, it's funny that you mentioned that because it actually is an issue on our streets. We often close the streets because those wakes do impact the buildings and water goes into the building. So, yes, is the answer to your question.
No water skiing allowed?
So this isn't exactly a once-in-a-100-year sort of situation. It seems more like every decade or so. Is there any sort of longer-term remediation that's available, or is this just life on a swamp and we have to put up with it every so often?
I think that the majority of the flooding came from Carneros Creek coming in at Arnold. And when it comes down that hill and that concrete swell and hits the airport, it overflows and goes straight out to the airfield. I think that's a concern. But in talking with the engineers and planners, it seems that the cost to try to fix that exceeds the cost of periodic flooding. So, Jeff, I don't know if you have other comments.
And it's just the elevation of the water. You've got water standing on the airfield that's an equal height to the water coming down the creek, so there's nowhere for it to go unless, you're going to pump it into the ocean.
Was the slough mouth open at that time? And could it have been more open and prevented the flooding, or would it have flooded anyway?
It was open continuous. We didn't have any restrictions for the slough mouth for this. And it's very wide and open, flowing freely right now, or since this.
All the channels are just at capacity, and then when the tide is also high, it's just, there's nowhere for the water to go.
So
But
it was
can't flow
not
fast enough.
capacity at the slough mouth that...
No.
Was there any water that got into any of the T hangars?
I didn't hear any reports of any water in the T hangars. We did have other buildings occupied by tenants that got water in them.
But those T hangars that we constructed are above the flood. They're elevated. So when we constructed those, they were built above the flood line.
And from the pictures, it wasn't clear how far north did the water go in the above all aviation, that row of hangars and then the tie downs? Was that underwater, or did it stay more out towards the airfield?
It was primarily to the south side of that area, so the service road in that area was flooded. But I would estimate less than maybe about 50 feet north of the service road, or maybe 150 feet north of the north end of the parallel runways in the grass. But in the tie downs, there was not much flooding where the aircraft were parked. A few of them had a small amount of water, but the majority of the deeper water was on the edge of the taxiway and then on the Hangar 1 and Hangar 2 ramp.
Thank you.
So I'm curious, in addition to the $50-some thousand you estimated in repair costs, do you have an estimate for basically the lost revenue of being down a day? What does that look like?
Commissioner Miller, we have not done that calculation. It's certainly fairly easy to do because we could look at the landing fees that we would lose and also concession revenue, and have done that in the past when we submitted claims to FEMA for reimbursement. But I don't have it tonight.
And is that something that will be done?
Yes.
Any other questions? All right, that brings us to the director's report.
Well, since we've had such a full agenda this evening, I would just like to comment, even with the cancellations that we had this past month, you'll notice that our passenger count is still up this month over the prior month, 5.3%, and year-to-date, 5.5%. And your other chart that you have, American Airlines was up 37.9%. I mean, that's really huge. That just shows that Dallas service is just taking off. Great. And Tom did mention that last year at this time it was leap year, so he had an extra day, so he's hedging his bets on the slight losses we had in some of these others. Deanna covered marketing, so she's doing the RFQ for the new marketing contract, which we're really excited about that. The airfield electrical supply and fence project, remember, we've done so well, being so economical with it, that LEAF has been able to add on to that particular contract, and the last piece of it is underway right now, so it should be completed, I would say, within the next couple of weeks or the end of the month. Runway 725 overlay project, that's also our next major AIP grant, and we're still working on that design, trying to get the design to fit the budget, because right now we're over budget on that particular project. We are still scheduled for the appeal hearing on 6100 Hollister on April 11th, City Council. And just one item on the noise abatement graph that you have, where you'll see there's quite a few calls from the city of Goleta, and that's North Goleta, I would assume, because it pertains to the parallels. Sometimes Surf Air with the Pilatus will land on 15 right, Operationally, it's good for them to do that because they go to Atlantic. Noise-wise, it's not a good idea. And just to let you know, that plus helicopter operations, trying to keep those folks in line. And operations does a great job in communicating the appropriate flight paths to all of our tenants. With that, I'll close unless you have some additional questions.
Okay, any questions? Then I think our last item is we are adjourned.
Very
Thank
good.
you all.
Thank you.